And welcome today. We are pleased to invite Greg Mechler, who is going to be our speaker today. He comes to us as the chair of St. Jude's Career Alliance up in Allen and has a wealth of knowledge and experience. I'll let him tell you more about that in just a little bit. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Greg for his presentation.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen here. All right. Can you see it?
Yes.
All right. All right. You never know what's going to happen on some of these things, but here we are. It's Wednesday noon, and as I'll go through, here is what we're going to do today. This is the first experience in our 4 experience workshop that we present 4 times a year. So we're going to be talking about doing a deep dive today, and that's really exploring yourself in a very significant way. And it's really the first step in conducting an effective search so that you can find the job that you really want. And all of you mentioned different things such as project manager, even changing different career paths and so forth. And the best way to get started is to really explore yourself. A little bit about me. I've been involved in hiring for longer than I care to say, but really right out of the chute, my first job involved hiring truck drivers and managers for a growing trucking company. And I did that for 18 years and then started a consulting company that was focused on the hiring process and the management process. So it's how do you get good people and how do you keep good people? So that was what I've done since then, and that was 1994. And I still do some business in that area with a smaller number of clients now, but still help people primarily on the hiring side. My consulting business is helping people hire better, because I'm sure many of you have run into situations where the interviewer is highly untrained. So you're in an interview and that person really doesn't know much about how to conduct an effective interview. And that's not a good thing for you as a candidate. But anyway, right now, I also work with the Professional Dynametrics Behavioral Assessment System as part of that. And I'm married, live in Allen. We have 4 granddaughters right now. So we'll get into the program here. There's a lot to cover in a relatively short period of time, and I want to give you an opportunity to do some work as we're going through this. And also, I want to encourage you to ask questions. So at any point in the process, if you have a question, if you can either put it in the chat window, and Tracy's going to watch the chat window for me and let us know that you have a question, or you can just raise your hand on screen, like that, and we'll call on you just as if we were in person. So one of the things we do at St. Jude is we have, over the years, we had a leader, Jack Bick, who spent a lot of time developing a program based on existing resources. You've probably found that to be true if you've been out there looking at going to Barnes and Noble maybe and looking at all the books on hiring and interviewing and so forth. And many times they're all very similar. And I've noticed myself from the time I first started looking for a job that many of the resources are very similar. The big change today is technology. I mean, the steps are pretty straightforward. So this chart right here gives you a view of what we consider to be the hiring process from beginning to end, to accepting a job offer and going to work. And so, of course, today we're talking about this first step, the know yourself area. And we'll go through these first two phases, know yourself and star stories today. The rest of these elements we present in our workshop, the Champion Way workshop, which is based on the book that Jack wrote. So these expectations were really for the whole overall program, but it basically is something we're going to cover today too. It's a guided tour. We're not going to get a chance to do a lot of work on it. You're going to have work to do after this is over. And you all, I'm sure, are well aware of that. And okay, why are we not advancing? Okay, there we go. So you've all probably done a lot of work already in this area, but there's always more to do. And especially if you're trying to do a targeted approach with strong networking, it really requires spending a lot of time doing research. But today we're going to be focused on researching yourself. And this starts with having a positive attitude. I think that's highly important. It's your attitude is going to determine how you come across to interviewers and others, and just how you go about getting things done along the way. So a phrase that we use, and it's been attributed to several different people, but it's what you are is God's gift to you, or what you make of yourself is your gift back to God. So today, we're going to look at the various parts of finding out what you have made of yourself, what your strengths are that you bring to the table, and how can you deploy those strengths effectively. So first step in this little phase here is our review of attitudes. And the first one is developing an outward outlook. So as you well know, you have now moved into a marketing program. You're marketing yourself, and it's all about what you can do for the employer. So your question is, what can I do for you? Not what can they do for you? So what can you do for them? I think I twisted that around a little bit. But the other thing that's going on right now is change. So it's recognizing that this marketplace is changing. There's always different things happening out there. The types of roles are changing. The job opportunities are changing. There's more technology. So employers are utilizing technology in many different ways. So that it hasn't, right now, as you've probably been observing, there are a lot of jobs out there, but they may not be the jobs that you have been trained for and that you really want. So it's just recognizing that there's a lot of change. You've got to be flexible and be able to shift and adjust along the way as you execute your job search plan. And as a result of all that change, there's some confusion sometimes and a disconnect with reality. So some of the things we recommend doing here is really reaching out and finding a mentor, somebody that can work with you as you pursue your next career opportunity, and help you with a number of other things that go along with that. It's managing finances during this time, putting creativity into some of the materials, so forth. There's a lot of things that can be done here, but the market is confusing sometimes, especially when you're looking to change roles. that is even more challenging. And competition is higher than ever, even though there's more jobs and candidates. In fact, if you drive around anywhere around Collin County, just about every storefront has got a help wanted sign in the window right now. But again, those are probably jobs you're not that interested in. The jobs that you really want are not readily observable. Some of them get posted, but a lot of them don't. And so the other thing that happens is the really good jobs are going to have several, many times 7 to 10 candidates that are relatively equally qualified. Especially for higher level jobs. Some of you had talked about, I know of somebody, one of you had mentioned a VP of operations role that you had. Those kind of jobs are, they're not plentiful, and there's multiple candidates usually for those jobs, and they wouldn't be in the running if they didn't have similar qualifications to yours. So one way to look at this period of time too is that there's a reason for the timeout in your life. And so it's an opportunity to step back and pause and reflect on where you're going, where you want to go, why you want to go there, and then connect to God. So we strongly recommend setting aside some time to pray and listen, using contemplative prayer methods, reflect on those prayers, and plan. So with God's help, putting together a search plan that works well for you. And one thing to consider too, from an attitude standpoint, is that you are in control of your career and the situation. So it's what you do, how you do it, and what resources you use that puts you in control. And when you're going out to an interview, you're on equal footing with the hiring manager, because you're there to evaluate them as much as they're evaluating you. And then another aspect to consider is that all jobs are temporary. So there's no job that's going to be a guaranteed employment for the rest of your life. In fact, in today's marketplace, people are looking at changing jobs every 2 to 3 years now. And it's not, that used to be a negative on a person's resume back 20 or 30 years ago. Today, that's not a negative. In fact, it becomes a positive because you've had diverse experiences. So it's important to invest in yourself, stay current. And that's certainly much easier to do now with the internet and access to resources through that, as well as we strongly recommend the library these days. That's still a great place to go. And then networking with people to talk about business, and taking courses now that you can do online. And then, as I mentioned earlier, really all companies are hiring. Even companies that don't have a help wanted sign in the window, typically every business and every part of a business has got people that aren't performing up to expectations. And over time, those people will leave and be replaced. And so those jobs may not be posted in public. They may not be on a job board, but they're out there. And that's where networking is really important. So even companies that aren't advertising are hiring. And so that's what we call the hidden job market. And it's important to embrace that. And one thing about this is that human nature is constant. So many times we may get discouraged by the process and step back and maybe slow down, not do all the work we want to do because we've been discouraged. You've been on an interview, you didn't get the job. And that's that's something you have to deal with. But one thing to keep in mind about that is the marketing concept. This is a marketing / sales process. And so in sales, a good salesman only makes about 2 sales out of 10 sales calls. And so if you're capable of doing that on a regular basis, that means you're getting rejected 8 times out of 10. And so that's just part of the process, so it's really important to go on as many interviews as you can, even if they're with organizations or going into jobs that you're not necessarily excited about. But it's important to get experience interviewing, as well as sometimes you just never know what kind of scenarios might open up for you. And this is one thing based on a survey that Indeed did, is that 99% of employees surveyed say confidence is the most important thing for a successful job search. And I think that's absolutely true. And that's what we're going to be focused on here going forward. That's one of the purposes of the deep dive, is that if you really do this thoroughly, it will help you build confidence in who you are, what you do, and how you can help an employer. So today, our learning objective for this program is to get basics of how to do a deep dive, and then create a star story. We aren't going to have time to do multiple star stories, but hopefully we can have time to do one. And we'll talk more about that when we get there. So here we go. These are the 4 parts of doing a deep dive. We call it the 4-way audit. So the first step is an internal audit of yourself. So there's several things we do, and I would suggest taking some notes, because I don't have that built into the slides or anything. But in the internal audit, you should, number 1, list all the jobs that you've had, as many as you can remember, and briefly identify what you liked and didn't like about them and why. And as you go through this, of course, many of you have a list of jobs built into your resume and on LinkedIn. And so if you've already done this, that's great. But if you haven't, really go back all the way to the first job that you can remember, and just list them out. And it helps you to identify, oh, that one, I had a job in college. It was just part-time, but I really liked doing that. And so that's one thing you can do. And then there's a hard skills, soft skills analysis that's strongly recommended. So listing all the hard skills that you have, and those are things such as your degrees, if you have them, any specific training and education that you have, those sorts of things, what your capabilities are. And then on the soft skills side, we're talking about relationship skills. So your ability to communicate verbally, in writing, your ability to interact with others, those sorts of things. If you can list those out, things like good team player, I can communicate with others effectively. Those are the soft skills. In today's world, soft skills many times will exceed hard skills in terms of qualifications. In fact, the higher level jobs in an organization, the larger the scope of management responsibility, the more that soft skills are needed to be effective. The next step here in the four-way audit is to have others help you. So this is bringing in other people, and then we've got a little bit more on that later in the slide, a couple slides later. And it's really forming a small team of people that can give you feedback about you. And it could be having a family member, a close friend, a co-worker from the past, anybody that you trust that can give you honest feedback about yourself. Very important in doing your audit. A third step is professional assessments. And again, we've got another slide later. Those are things like the PDP program that I work with, as well as many others. And then the fourth aspect of the four-way audit is the spiritual side. So taking time to talk to God and listen for what he may have to say to you. So why do we want to do a self-audit? And of course, one we've talked about already, and that's that we want to build our confidence up so we can go out and effectively communicate about ourselves. And again, keeping in mind, it's who we are, what we do, and how we can help. So how do we effectively communicate about that? And we do that by doing this deep dive in the self-audit. So many times by going through that, like one of the exercises listing out all the jobs you've had, sometimes we forget about some details that might be really important. And by going back through those things, it might trigger some memories, that could be very helpful. And we also tend to underestimate ourselves. I know I was raised in the Midwest, and the general philosophy was you don't want to brag. You want to be humble. You don't want to be too outgoing and out there and self-centered. So that was, my parents pretty much preached that all the time, and that's how I was raised. So when you get to this point, you're having to sell yourself, it becomes more challenging. And we tend to rationalize things. In part of your self-audit, you're going to run across, you may have had some problem areas that came up and some difficulties, and you want to be honest about those, and to yourself at least, and not rationalize. So we do tend to rationalize sometimes why things happen a certain way, but to honestly look at yourself and how you contributed to the problems that occurred, that's important too. And also by going through this process, you can connect the dots. So this helps you to see how things worked, how different aspects of your education process connected with your job selection and job performance and so forth. There's a lot of things that can be connected that can help you, again, going forward. And so right now we're going to take a little time, just very brief time. I think we've got about 3 minutes. I just want you to think about your top 3 attributes. And they can be anything you want them to be: a hard skill, soft skill, something else that you might think of. And just write them down quickly, and then indicate after that, how do they help you? And we're going to have we'll have a time to share this here when we're done. So I just want you to consider that. So we got 3 minutes if you start now. Also, Thoreau, is there any questions so far?
Hi, Greg, this is Scott. I think, so I know
Yes.
there's a couple of individuals on this call that are just in the new college hire phase. So I think your reflection comments are good in that they're not going to have direct job experience, but maybe their roles in college or they had leadership positions in clubs and things like that. Those are all very applicable and transferable. So
absolutely. And whatever even part-time jobs that you had, you know, when we were looking at doing this exercise, I started out going back into the jobs I had in high school, actually. My first job as a paper boy, you know, and what was good about that, what was helpful, what, you know, what I liked, what I didn't like, and then on through different summer jobs that I had. So those of you, you know, that's an excellent feedback, Scott. So those of you who don't have a lot of job experience, you might have more than you think. And so it's important. Is everybody basically, you know, pretty much done? It looks like you're all kind of top 3 attributes. Dana, would you be willing to share?
Sure, I have people development, continuous improvement, and collaborative partner.
Excellent. Primarily soft skills, because you're the one, you had mentioned being a VP of operations, right?
Yes.
And it's heavily about soft skills at that level. It's about, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
important. As you advance, you know, the first line jobs are, you know, I would say heavily technical, unless you're in sales or some type of job like that. But so thanks, Scott. How do those help you in terms of how you can help a company?
Well, my target companies are growth companies, so having staff available to fuel the growth is very, very important. And then being a collaborative partner across the organization. I interacted from the C-suite across the organization, kind of linking siloed departments to improve communication, profitability, and efficiency. So having that enterprise-wide vision, I think, is an important part. And then the last one, just continuous improvement, which is probably one of my, I'll call it my geek skills. I like taking processes and tearing them apart and putting them back together again to see if I can make it more efficient. So.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting too is those skills can cut across virtually any organization, because I think anybody out there, if you're in an organization, you need all 3 of those. Anyone else want to share their top 3 attributes? Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it.
Yep.
I'm going to call on somebody, one more person, if we don't get a volunteer. Nobody?
I'll go.
Scott? Yeah, all right.
So I'd say my top 3, and I really liked Dana's comments. So I'd say well organized, excellent interpersonal skills, and strong analytical skills. And so at my stage in my career, I see that my soft skills are really my strength. I really like working for companies that, you know, there's some chaos, there's some broken things. I like looking at ways to collaborate and improve upon the processes that they currently have, and helping kind of and working for different groups and looking how to kind of benefit each of those groups as well. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Scott. Anyone else? One more chance. We have time for one more, I guess. So Daniel, how are you doing on this?
I was kind of struggling, to be honest. I put organized, good work ethic, and integrity.
Again, 3, yeah, really important ones.
Okay, great.
I heard somebody,
I just said those are great.
oh, great, yeah, yeah. So,
Thanks.
yeah, thanks, Daniel. Keep working on how those help you. Maybe you can also, in fact, everybody, this is where kind of star stories get built. And I'm expecting that most of you are familiar with star stories, but you need one for each one of those attributes. Where it came into play, how you used that, the attribute to accomplish a result. And that can really solidify your ability to communicate, in an interview. So thanks everybody for sharing on this today. And Ezra, I've already said this, soft skills are really important today, I think more so than ever before. And they're, as you advance in an organization, you move into higher levels of management, they become more and more important. So this is, we talked about a little bit earlier, is forming a team to work with you in your job search. And so we call it creating a marketing team. And it can be, you can have a couple of different groups, really. One is an inner circle of maybe two to four people who are closer friends and relatives. Sometimes relatives can be a little problematic, but if you've got friends that can help you, and most people are willing to, when asked, people are really willing to help, but they have to be asked. They don't volunteer usually. But somebody, people you trust who can give you feedback and guidance about what you're doing, how well you're doing, and kind of hold you accountable. In some organization, you might have heard the term accountability group, and that's the same thing as this inner circle. Then there can be an outer circle of contacts, which are maybe people from your prior company that you know real well, or from other industry, if you're involved in any kind of professional groups, or have contact with people at vendors or customers or those sorts of things. So those things can be useful as well. Let's see here. And then, Jack Beck likes to talk about chance encounters, just asking some stranger you've met for the first time, say at church or something, what they think of you. And I don't think that happens too often, but if you're comfortable doing that, you can get some really good feedback of how you're perceived by others. That, so often you've probably heard about the fact that hiring managers many times make their mind up in the first 10 seconds of an interview. I mean, it seems crazy, but that's, I think there's some truth to that. So getting feedback of how you come across in those first 10 seconds can be a very powerful thing. We talked about the third big element of the four-way audit is professional assessments, and I offer the PDP Pro Scan. So if any of you would be interested in doing that, you can contact me. The DISC is another good one. Some of you may have done that. Many of you have done some of these things. A lot of companies use both of these programs, the PDP, the DISC. Clifton Strengths, another good assessment used by many organizations. Myers-Briggs, you've probably heard of that one, used in a lot of universities and churches, other groups. Then there is a spiritual gifts assessment that is out there too, if you're interested in that. Whoops, didn't want that to happen. And then there's some more esoteric kinds of assessments like handwriting analysis.
Now, Greg,
The last part of the four-way audit is putting God on your team.
Greg, I have
And
a
God
quick,
is your number one champion.
Greg, I have a
So
quick
always keep
question
that
on
in mind.
handwriting analysis.
What's that?
I have a quick question on the handwriting analysis. Is that really,
Yes,
when I think of that, I think of like FBI profilers and, you know,
right.
um,
Yeah,
using that.
they're not especially easy to come by. You know, there are not that many people that do handwriting analysis, so you have to find that person. And I'm not sure, for your purposes of understanding your strengths better and being able to communicate better, that the scientific basis for some of those things is not quite as sound as it is for the psychometric tools like PDP and DISC and even the Clifton strengths. Those are very well researched, almost continuously researched. I know I've worked with the PDP program for quite a long time, over 30 years, and it's under continuous research at the University of Northern Colorado. And so you get some very valid results out of it. But yes, handwriting analysis is definitely used. And if you're using a reliable professional, then it can be an effective source of feedback for you. One thing to think about is just to eliminate some of the negative emotions that occur depending on how you became unemployed or where you are in your career. If you're looking at doing a career change, like I think we mentioned, some of you are just out of college looking for your first job. So some of these things wouldn't really apply. But if you've lost a job unexpectedly, or even if you did expect it, but it's still not something you wanted to have happen, these kind of emotions, these are, as you probably realize, are essentially the phases of grief that a person goes through, and shock, guilt, fear, denial, anger, rage. And I've seen anger really be problematic for someone in the job search process, because they're really hurt and angry about what happened to them at the last employer. And until they get past that and somehow deal with it, that underlying anger does come out in interviews. And I've interviewed literally thousands of people over the years, and and you can always sense that there's some underlying hostility going on there, and that makes it more challenging for the hiring manager to make a positive decision. So depression can come into play, and so if that's the case too, then it's important to get some, if any of these are a serious problem for you, then we strongly recommend getting professional help for it, because they will get in your way as you go through the job search process. So then, along with those things, and it's really building mental positivity, and that's your self-confidence and self-talk. And this is some of the things, just a few things that we talk about, is having that I have the intelligence and the ability to learn. And then my life has value separate from my job. And that's really an important one you want to keep in mind. We sometimes get caught up in our jobs so much that they define who you are. And you definitely want to separate those two things. And then you are in control of your actions and your thoughts. And God can lead me to peace and fulfillment. So again, we really emphasize the spiritual aspect of this. We're doing pretty good on time, so we have time to do a star story. And I think I saw a lot of head nodding. People, many of you are familiar with star stories, but some of you may not be. And so a star story is an acronym. It stands for situation, task, action, and result. And the reason we've got result separated down there is that that is really the key part of those four things. So one of the ways that you can put together a star story is to work from the result back through the other steps. So the situation and task is really about defining the problem. Well, here's the situation I was in. I'll just give you an example. As the corporate director of driver recruiting for a large trucking company, I was tasked with bringing on over 2,000 drivers in 1 year to both cover turnover as well as support growth projections. And so my task was pretty challenging because the previous year we had recruited about 1,000 drivers, but the company was growing. We saw market opportunities. We wanted to continue to add drivers. In trucking, the turnover rate's relatively high, so you have to take that into account. And our turnover rate was roughly 50%. So if you're going to grow by 1,000 drivers, you've got to replace all the turnover. So I took several actions in doing that, and one being bringing our recruiters together, and we brought in a couple of sales experts who took them through a 2-day sales training course. So we had 19 recruiters located all over the country. And prior to that, one of the actions was assessing their skills and using kind of a secret shopper approach, and then determining that they needed more sales training. And so we did that. And the result was that we ended up recruiting 3,400 drivers that year, which exceeded the goal by a significant number, and turnover stayed constant. So we were able to grow faster. And the good news was that the sales marketing area, we were able to keep pace with the level of growth that we were experiencing at the time. So that's the result is the most important thing to focus on. So what you want to do in this exercise, we're going to have you just practice writing one star story and find a result in any job that you've had over the years. Doesn't have to be the last one, but make it a result. It should be quantitative normally. That it could be how much revenue was increased as a result of what you did, or costs reduced. Those are the two major results in any organization, including a nonprofit. You have to increase income, revenue, and reduce costs. So take a couple of minutes, take about 3 minutes, and just draft a star story. Maybe you already have some, and if you do, then sharing them with the group would be great. And we're going to, have a few of you share a star story. Okay, Marissa, would you have one that you could share with us?
Okay, this is for my last company. It's a publicly listed bank with almost 5,000 branches and units of the 5,000 branches. And the task was to improve on the regulatory rating. So what I did as a compliance officer was come up with an inventory of the list of findings and appoint a designated person per unit per branch. So we'll be able to work on it. So after a year, most of the findings were justified and resolved. And the result is that the 100-year-old bank which never had a good audit rating has its regulatory examination rating improved to a very reasonable rating, which the board was happy for. So the
Alright.
situation, the task, the action, and the result.
Excellent. Good job, Marissa. Anyone else
Thank
want
you.
to jump in and share a story? Kathy, do you have one you could share? Oh, unmute, please.
I was tasked with implementing the training program for 28,000 physicians, clinicians, and nurses for an implementation of the Epic electronic health record. So I developed a project plan and coordinated all the logistics, and over the course of several months ensured that all staff were trained and ready to go for the implementation date of the electronic health record.
All right. Yeah, those are two really good examples, I think. For all of you, it's really important to do the star story, and in the similar format Marissa and Kathy used. I think what you heard was they can communicate a success briefly. That's, star story should be able to be told in less than 2 minutes. And the other thing you can do with it is to have the results at your fingertips, so you can insert that at a point in the interview. Maybe if the interviewer isn't asking you, you can just share with them and, say, for example, using Marissa's case, that, I was able to dramatically improve the compliance rating of our bank. And the idea being that the interviewer then will ask you, well, that sounds impressive. How did you do that? And then you have the opportunity to go through the steps. So we're running up against the clock here, so I'm going to move on, and we're just about done. So today we recommend for any interview that you go on, you have at least 3 to 5 star stories in your portfolio, more if necessary. I always think about, like, on your resume for each employment, you have 2 bullet point results, which then can be turned into star stories. Generally speaking, we're a big believer at St. Jude Career Alliance and using the Champion Way book in the 1-page resume. There are different opinions about that. We don't have time to get into that, but employers generally know what the job duties are when they're looking at your resume. They know, if you were VP of operations, generally what the job duties were. What they don't know is what the results were that you achieved in that job. So that's why it's really important to stay focused on those. And then how do you use star stories? Well, that's why we put them in the deep dive portion, because it's the first step and you can use them putting your resume together, networking. So you want to use your star stories whenever you get a chance, when you're out there networking in a group or wherever you meet somebody at church, you meet somebody at a school event or whatever it might be. Cover letters, thank you notes, that whole thing. You can use those star stories over and over again, especially, of course, in interviews. If we had more time, we'd ask you to think about what else you could use them for, but we don't. So we've got about a minute or two for a Q&A. If anybody's got a burning question they want to get out. And as I mentioned, this is the first experience in a 4-experience program that we do. And we do have one coming up. And Marissa attended our January workshop. And hopefully you had a fruitful experience there. But we have another one coming up Saturday, April 2nd. So it's a week from Saturday. And they take place at St. Jude's in Allen from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And it's based on the book, The Champion Way, which is written by Jack Bick. It's if you aren't able to go to the workshop, you can get it on Amazon. But if you come to the workshop, you get a copy of the book, lunch, and powerful insights into every phase of the job search process. And that's the beauty of going to the workshop, is you get the whole system laid out, not just pieces here and there, but the whole system. So from beginning to end. And the last part of the program is how to negotiate your job offer. And so that's the objective, of course, is to get that job offer. And there is a small fee of $25 for this program, and you can it requires pre-registration. So if you go on this website, if you're interested, just jot it down, stjudecareeralliance.com. And there's a couple of places to go, and it'll take you to the registration page.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that.
Well, I want to encourage you all. I think that's going to be a great opportunity. You've gotten a good preview here with Greg's wonderful presentation. So I want to encourage you to go ahead and, if you're in town, be able to attend that. Also, we do have another event that I think will be really helpful for you, and that is on April 7th in the evening, the Power of Hello. So I did send that out also as email, like I did this, and I'll send another one too. But mark your calendars for Thursday evening, the 7th. That is going to be a great professional branding. I know Dana has heard Paula Kelly speak and had recommended her. And so we're excited to have her is talking as well. So that's great. So any other questions before we wrap up?
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Good. Well, Greg, we're just so appreciative of your time, and thank you for being willing to do this. And we'll just close in a very quick prayer, turn off the recording.